morning. Welcome to Central Christian Church. It's wonderful to be here with you today on such a beautiful, beautiful day. I have a couple of announcements. There will be a general board meeting next Sunday after worship. All board members, please attend. And then there will be a congregational meeting in 2 weeks, Sunday, September 26th, right after worship. And I believe Linda has a couple of things to say.
I have two things. The road rally will be in 2 weeks on Saturday, September 25th. We will meet at the exit 139 Park and Ride at 10 a.m. Everyone is invited. It's a lot of fun, so get your group together and figure out who's going to ride with whom in the car. I think it's nice to have 3 or 4 people in a car because that way you have more people looking for answers and signs and keeping an eye out to help answer the questions that you need to do along the way. Chicken will be provided. We're asking you to bring your own drink and a covered dish for a potluck dinner, and bring a folding chair. There are picnic tables there to eat at, but later if we want to just sit around and visit, we might want to sit in our chairs. There is a sign-up sheet on the board on the wall in the narthex, so if you are going to come, please sign up. We need to know how much chicken to order, and we just want to make sure we're going to have enough people to even put this on. So it's a lot of fun. So if you have any questions, you can ask me or Jerry Eagle, who is here today. And the other thing is we are updating our congregational directory, our congregational information. You don't have to be a member to be in the directory. If you attend and you feel part of us and want to be in the directory, we'd love to put you in there. If you're not in there, please fill out one of these cards that's sitting on the table in the narthex, and we will add you. And I will be out there to answer questions and to help with that. And we also want to make sure if you are not receiving the monthly newsletter by email, but you want to get it that way, let me know when I'm out there and I'll get that corrected. And our One Call Now system that calls, lets you know that a picnic's coming up or somebody died or anything else important that we want to spread the news. If you're not getting those phone calls or texts, see me and I will get that corrected. Thank you.
I'm going to warn you ahead of time. Worship will be very different this morning. Well, I shouldn't say very different, but it will be different. And I have to juggle a lot of things and it may fall apart, as well as glasses and a microphone. But anyway, we'll make it. I was not supposed to be here today, and neither were 7 other women. We were supposed to be at Women's Retreat, which is a wonderful event. Our region puts it on. We usually, in days past, we had about 130 women that would attend. We had 80 that were signed up despite COVID. We were real excited, but about, I think the week before, sometime that week, we decided that because of the rise of COVID in our state, it probably wouldn't have been good to bring women from different areas of our region together in one spot. We did not want to be responsible for anything, tragic happening. So I prepared. I was on the leadership to present the program, and Sharon Kisner had the banner ready for our retreat, and I thought, well, let's just do a sort of a version of what I would have done for the retreat, which means I normally have a Bible verse, and we talk about the Bible verse, but today it's a subject, and then we'll talk about that subject. So it's a little different than I normally do, maybe a little out of my comfort zone, but I wanted, first of all, to talk about Sharon's banner. She gave me some information on how it came about. At Women's Retreat every year, traditionally, we have a banner that shows visually our theme. Our theme this year comes from the book Love Heals by Becca Stevens. I referenced her in a sermon not too long ago, can't remember when, but not too long ago. She is the founder of Thistle Farms, which is a program for the healing of survivors of human trafficking, prostitution, abuse of women. And that was the theme, different ways that the love of God heals in our lives. And her book is it comes out of her setting of abuse, but it speaks to everyone. And it's a very good, I use it as a devotional book each day if anyone's interested. So Sharon had the book to come up with a banner that would display love healing. And I love the way that she's come up with this. But the background of how she did it was fascinating. She was looking out in her, and I hope, Sharon, I hope I'm saying this correctly. You can correct it somehow later. But she was looking in the beauty of God's creation in her backyard and saw light coming through the fence, the rickety fence in her backyard. And she thought, oh, that would be a beautiful background for this piece of art. But she said there's no way to duplicate that. God's creation is just no way to put it on canvas. But yet, she so beautifully captured, I think, that thought. The characters in here were, she said, their different personalities came out of them as she was creating. And she said as she drew each character on here, it would remind her of people in her life or of events in her life. And so it became wonderful memories. It also became time to pray and to think about the people that have been in her life now. And so each of these have character. And I invite you, I know it's hard to see it. I wish I'd thought about putting it on the PowerPoint, but I did not think about it till actually last night in the shower, which was way too late to get it to Kathy. But if you have a chance, come up and see it. It is wobbly on the easel, but afterward we do invite you to come up. Sharon, I think, will hold it so that we can see it. As I said, this book talks a lot about the women on Thistle Farms. And in one place, Becca Stevens talks about the women forming a circle, joining hands, and having a candle in the middle. And so Sharon's vision of this banner was to have a candle in the middle. But she just wasn't satisfied with it. She tried several times as she was creating it to put one in. It just didn't work for her. She said one morning the light was coming through her painting, and she saw the cross piece on the back, and it showed through the canvas in the cross. And so she felt the Holy Spirit's leading her into putting the cross at the center of this very beautiful banner. So I invite you to visually look at that as we talk, or to think about how her creation, the wonderful thing about art, and I say this about preaching, I hope you all take it and run. We each see different things as we look at art and hear music and hear speaking. So we are going to call ourselves into worship. If you all would stand. I'm going to read this short little passage from Nehemiah. Begins with speaking to all of the leaders in the land. I'm not going to try to say their names, so we'll start in the middle. And it says, stand up and bless the Lord. Stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. And Ezra said, you are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. To all of them you give life, and the host of heaven worships you. God of love, we come this day to hear your words of love and hope. Enter our hearts and our spirits this hour, we pray. Help us to sit by the cool springs of your life-giving wisdom, to center our thoughts in you. Amen. You may be seated.
Our scripture this morning comes from Psalms 131, verses 1 and 2. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a child quieted at its mother's breast, like a child that is quieted in my soul. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of these holy words.
Shower heads and good dry towels, and frying eggs that sound like songs, with bits of salt measured in my palm. It's all a part of a sacrament, as holy as a day is spent.
And the checkout girl counting change, and hands that shook my hands today, and hymns of peace fly overhead and spread their wings like their parents did. Blessed be the dawn that runs in her sleep, chase some wild and elusive thing.
sheets like folding hands, to pray as only laundry can. I'm letting go of all my fear, like autumn leaves made of earth and air. For the summer came and summer went, as holy as the day is spent.
Holy is the place I stand, to give whatever small good I can, and the empty page and the open book, redemption everywhere I look. Unknowingly we slow our pace, in the shade of unexpected grace, and with grateful smiles and sad lament, as holy as the day is spent, and morning light sings providence, as holy as the day is spent.
Thank you. The program, as I said, the theme is Love Heals, and we had 7 presenters, and each of us were presenting certain chapters of the book. And the chapter that I was graced with is called Love Heals Beside Still Waters, Learning to Find Peace When Life Happens. And I love that theme, partly because of my love of nature and the idea of sitting by still waters. And so we're talking about personal peace today versus world peace, which is often my bent. But today we're going to talk about personal peace within our lives and use some nature imagery. Becca Stevens reminds us that love heals as we calm ourselves and make room to feel revived. You see, it's an intentional act. Lindsay's, my deceased husband, Lindsay's son was the supervisor for one of the trucking companies in Atlanta. And they were given the job to bring the beluga whales into the Atlanta Aquarium. So I was fascinated to find out how they could bring these whales in a truck. Well, apparently they put them in some, I think in a sling kind of thing, inside of water, inside of the truck. And I hope I'm telling all this correctly. This was many, many, many years ago. And I said, boy, they must have had to stop traffic so they could go real slow coming in and all. And he said, oh no, you could drive as fast as you wanted. That was not the problem. He said it was the stopping. And you can imagine, you're going at great speed and then the water sloshing and then stopping could kill the animal within. And so when we think about our lives and our moving through life as fast as we can, the stopping sometimes needs to be intentional. It's something we need to think about. How will we stop? Our verse this morning, Psalm 131, talks about in the beginning, Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. In other words, I'm not too haughty. I don't occupy myself with things that are too great and too marvelous. It says, no, I've calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. That comfort, that separation, but yet that comfort of being with the child's mother. My soul is like the weaned child. And so the idea of calming ourselves, coming to God in peace. And so this morning we could talk in depth about different ways to become peaceful. And she talks about several in here. I have some of my favorites. This is one of my favorite stories. In 1 Kings, it's the story about Elijah. And Elijah got into a scrape with Ahab and Jezebel. That's where we get the name Jezebel. Nobody names their little girls Jezebel because she has such a bad reputation. But they were going to kill him. And so he fled. And of course he's upset and probably, doesn't say in here, probably a little angry at God, thinking, I've been a good prophet. I've tried to do what God wanted me to do all this time, but everything is falling apart. And now here I am running for my life. And so he is alone, and a messenger comes to him and tells him to eat, which he does. And he's still wallowing away. And it says, the messenger said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, what are you doing here, Elijah? That still, quiet voice where we go to hear the voice of God. Often it needs to be still because of all that's going on around us. And so we find peace often when we find those places where we can hear God's voice. I think many of you and I have learned the peace of having one of little God's creations, little creations in the home, the petting and grooming of our beloved little furry friends. The sharing of life with a pet can be a very peace-giving time, moments. Jesus often went to a quiet place, preaching, teaching, walking through the countryside, and then every so often it says, Jesus got away from the crowd, went to those quiet places to pray. Instead of going to the women's retreat, I ran away to camp a couple days this week, went to Cedar Creek State Park. It's in Glenville. It's kind of tucked away, out of the way, beautiful place. The camper was right next to a little brook, and I enjoyed the quiet and peace of that brook and also the crackling campfire that night. The ambiance of God in that place where I could still myself to hear God's voice. You see, peace needs to be a habit. We need a habit to find those places where we can be still enough to hear God's voice. It might be hiking. I went hiking on a mountain trail. I never made it to the old stone trough that I wanted to see, but it was the journey of the hike in God's green earth, seeing the little flowers coming out of the ground, hearing the owl off in the distance, seeing the birds going overhead, seeing God in creation. It may be sitting in a green pasture, or like Sharon, when she created the banner, was looking in her own backyard early in the morning as the sun came through the fence, a God moment. It might be doing yoga. Erin has wonderfully introduced many of us to yoga. And in that practice, we are helped to clear and calm our bodies and our minds. It's a wonderful practice of peace, the peace of the body, not just the mind and the heart, but the entire body. You might find peace by soaking in a tub, that time alone, or I often find it in fishing and near the still waters of a lake or kayaking. It could be reading. Could be reading the Bible, meditating upon the Bible, which is a wonderful, peaceful habit. But we often see God in other kinds of literature too. It could be in journaling or in scrapbooking. It could be in driving and seeing some different scenery. It could be in a morning ritual of prayer. We find peace in God in many ways. But is it always easy to find peace when life happens? You see, we can pour this beautiful water into this mud, which is often in a lake, and you see it becomes muddy. It kind of makes the entire thing permeated with the mud of life. But then as we let it sit, after a while, the yuck of life begins to settle. And so how do we manage that, those two pieces in life, the mud, but yet bring in that peace? I say that often peace comes on the edge of danger. When I was in Alaska last month, we were on a bus in Denali and went way back in and viewing wildlife out there. Well, we had this wonderful thing happen. The bus stopped and a mother bear and her cub came up to the bus. The cub came behind, the mother was in the front. We had that danger outside the bus right there. And they are dangerous bears. But we were told to be absolutely quiet. And so in the peace of that moment, we're reviewing the danger right outside the door. And I think that's often what happens in life. It's on that edge. Either we've passed it or we're going into it. Life is never just peace. When I used to kayak whitewater, we would have the excitement of hearing ahead the water that was rippling, and we knew that we were going to go over a small waterfall or something, and so the tightening and the stress of the moment, knowing that we wanted to get through with the kayak up and not under, and that turbulence. But then, oh, the peace after the turbulence as the river evened out and we would go on down. Made me appreciate the calm after the excitement of the rapid. Well, Cedar Creek, in its beauty, came to, on Thursday, very calm and quiet. On Friday morning, other campers started coming in, one after another, for the weekend. And all of a sudden, the peace and calm of that beautiful place had neighbors' music, different music from different campers, and dogs barking and barking and barking and barking. And and then the trail came right down by the campers, so there were people coming down through, and all of a sudden the peace and the calm became a lot going on, and that peace just seemed to be cut off. But that's the way it is. Peace is not permanent. Life happens. And so what do? Well, part, I think, of our lives that would be the opposite of our peace is our busyness. And we do great things. The world needs our busyness. But I love the song that Lori and Leanne so beautifully sang. Thank you. It's one of my favorites. It's called Holy as the Day is Spent. I think when we see the holiness of life, when we see the holiness of folding laundry, the holiness of driving to work, the holiness of everything that we do in life, the holiness of each other, think how peaceful our relationships would be if we viewed each other as holy, God-made, God-given, part of the satisfaction and the wholeness of our life. Well, I began to think about what the opposite of peace might be. And so I looked on the internet, which is the way you always go to find great information. And it said the opposite is noise, irritation, conflict. And peace is the freedom from turbulence. Well, I wanted to add stress to that. And it could be maybe that the stress is caused by the noise, the irritation, and the conflict. But I know in my life, stress is the opposite of my peace. It's kind of that going down the river idea, the stress of the moment, but then the peace. It seems for me to be one or the other. It's hard to find peace in the middle of stress. Well, I listened to a podcast on stress, just happened to, and it was very interesting. She was, and I unfortunately did not get her name, she was a psychologist that spoke to crowds about how to eliminate stress in one's life. Spent years doing that. And then a study was done that looked at stress and the actual things that stress does. Now, we know that stress causes the blood vessels going to the heart to constrict, which is what causes heart attacks and strokes. And so it's very hard. Stress can be very hard on our vascular system. But what they found is the way we think about stress can change our body's response. If we can tell ourselves, and we do this in crisis counseling, we encourage people to remember times when they went through crises and made it, handled it, were able to get through it, and to take those tools and use them for the present crises. It's a way of telling oneself, I can handle this. I handled it before, so I can handle it now. And when we tell ourselves we can handle it, we have the same stress body responses, except we don't have the constricted blood vessels. And on top of that, they found out that stress actually produces the cuddle hormone, the feel-good, fuzzy-feeling hormone, oxytocin. Stress produces the cuddle hormone. And so if we have that stress, it can be good for us. That's what helps us preach the sermon better. It helps us do our job better. It helps us paint the canvas better. The stress of being into it, doing it right, getting it done, that's a good thing. If we can change our mindset that we can handle it. And then the oxytocin kicks in, which makes us want to be with each other. When we have stressful crises, we want a friend. We want a family member. We want somebody, that closeness of being together, trusting the self to handle the stress and pulling us together. Well, Becca Stevens shared one other way to find peace, and she said it's in sharing with someone who's in need. This morning on NPR, I wake up to NPR on Sunday mornings, and I'm always caught between looking at my sermon and getting that in my brain and listening to NPR. So I halfway do the NPR, but this morning it had a speaker, and I've forgotten her name. Did not write it down. Here we go again. I can't give credit, but she talked about the wood wide web. Apparently, under the earth in nature, there is fungi, and this fungi goes out, and it helps trees communicate with each other. They share nutrients, and the tree apparently can reject whatever the fungi are giving it. And so they found that in a healthy forest, the plant life, the animal life is also benefits from it, but everything involved is communicating with one another and helping one another to be healthy in the forest. And so what we do in our sharing helps everything be healthy as we communicate. And so at the end of the podcast, the person said, well, if we had the choice between a stressful job and a non-stressful job, are you saying we should take the stressful job? And she said, yes, if it has meaning. She said, do something meaningful with your life, even if it's going to cause some stress, because and then know that you can handle it. Take it on, but know that peace comes when we find our stress and our meaning in life. It's on that edge that we find our peace.